There are so many phantom numbers in that platform. There's a phantom growth that comes from the sky in his platform that arrives and changes his numbers.
Mr. Carney plans to continue the very policies that got us into this mess in the first place. In fact, he plans to go even further.
The Conservative math is not mathing, no. If you look at what they're proposing, the numbers are not based in any reality. They're making stuff up, saying they can get massive amounts of revenue off of things that don't make any sense.
All right, less than a week to go before the election, and we finally have some cold, hard numbers to talk about.
Of course, to the parties, if they're the opponents' numbers, they're going to be just magic or bogus or reckless.
But we do, finally, guys, I know you're pumped about this. We've got costed platforms, and there is a lot to look at in there. We're talking about tax cuts in some cases, big boosting to military spending, questions about what people are going to do with the size of government and the deficit. The question is, are Canadians paying attention? I'm Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's The House.
I'm Daniel Thibeault, host of Radio-Canada's political show, Les Coulisses du Pouvoir.
And I'm Jason Markusoff, having fun with numbers for CBC in Calgary.
And together, we are House Party, a weekly podcast diving into the big burning questions driving us toward Election Day. And this week, we're asking,
are platforms passé?
Jason, you're breaking my heart. Come on, journalists. We are supposed to be pumped up about this, no?
I like the numbers too, Catherine. I enjoy the numbers. I like getting dirty in them. Budget day is my Christmas in the spring too. But I get the sense that these parties, by putting them out at the very end of the campaign, feel that they're passé.
Yeah, I think they should be not passé, but I think they are a little bit. And if they were so important, party would table them before the last week of the campaign, or voters would demand them much faster in the campaign. They would be subject to insane scrutiny. The cynical reporter in me would like to remember an election where they actually mattered, like in the past 5 or 6 elections. When was the last time a platform was really the turning point of an election?
Well, okay, I can reach into provincial examples for one, but I want to suggest something first. I want to pull on a very Canadian turn of phrase here. Marshall McLuhan, some of you may remember him from your Comms 101 classes. Mm-hmm. The medium is the message. And I do think that there's something about that when it comes to platforms, right? The act of putting forward a costed platform does communicate to voters that you are serious, right? That, to borrow a phrase from Jagmeet Singh that he's been playing around with this week, that the math will math. And yes, usually 2 + 2 = 4 in party platforms. But then there are questions about like, well, you know, is 2 really the right count? And is it really going to achieve the results that you thought? But usually the maths. A time when it didn't. I was thinking we have to go back to 2014 in Ontario. Tim Hudak, 1 million jobs. Do you remember this? Tim Hudak promised that he was going to create 1 million jobs. And depending on who you ask, the math did not math. There were a lot of questions about whether what the party was really pitching to people in that province was going to happen. There was some suggestion that the party had miscalculated the number of person hours, and in fact, it was only about like 1/8 of the jobs that they said they would create that they would be able to create. And that led to questions that people had. Listen, it's not the average person that's going to pull out a party platform and take out their calculator and figure out what this all means. But the scrutiny, as you say, that comes from people who are well versed in this, I do think it helps people decide.
And you're very right, and I remember that campaign because I covered it. And the difference there was that he put that number way earlier in the campaign, and it was part of the slogan. And if I remember correctly, it was even on his bus, on his campaign bus. And so that was something that he decided to run with, and that's something that was heavily scrutinized from the very beginning of the campaign. That's what made a difference. If he had thrown that in a platform in the last week of the campaign, I'm not sure it would have had the same kind of impact.
And I think this is why the parties are kind of dreading putting this out and doing it at the last end. I mean, Poilievre put it out after the advance polls. It's because for your opposition, the platform is something that they print out and they roll up and they whack the other party with it. Catherine, the example you gave was when a platform mattered and it hurt the party. And I think that it's a necessary thing. I mean, it's sort of like you have to formally apply for a job and send in your CV, even, despite the fact that, your degree in high school or your degree in university where you got it doesn't really matter. But, if people find a problem with your resume, that's an issue. And I think that's sort of the context in which these are problematic for the parties. They don't like to put them out, but they know that they have to, because if they don't, and if everybody else does, people are going to say, well, where's your platform? And that would be probably even a bigger problem for some parties than putting out something that's kind of stinky.
And for those who may not remember, Tim Hudak didn't win that election. So that may be part of the reason why. And Doug Ford, after that, when he came back and ran on the next election, did not introduce any platform.
Mm-hmm. Here is what I will say, though, that it like you guys are right. Your political opponents do sort of take this opportunity. I like the sort of rolled up newspaper image there. But here's the thing. Platforms are a reality check, and maybe that's why parties are a little bit reticent. But you spend the whole campaign sort of like sometimes throwing around magic beans, right? You get a car, you get a tax cut. I'm going to make government smaller. But these things come with a cost, and parties are reticent to talk about that, and they get to kick the can all throughout the election campaign. They say, well, wait till you see our costed platform. And this is, I don't want to get too high on my horse here, but like it serves an important democratic function, even if people don't go leafing through these things, because it says, okay, you want a tax cut? Where's that money going to come from? Are we going to run a bigger deficit? Are we going to have to do program spending cuts? What does it look like, right? It is the counterbalance, and I sure hope they're not passé. If this is a house, it's the foundation, and yeah, maybe we only get to it in the last few days, but it's pretty darn important.
And it's totally important to make these promises. I think promises matter, policy matters. It's the stick by which you measure the performance of the government afterwards, and I think that is an important democratic function, and the costing, has that feature as well. We can get into this whole thing. Do the numbers actually hit reality? I live in Alberta, where they put out a budget, they set the oil price, what they think it is, and oil price goes up, oil price goes down. Factors go up, factors go down. Promises take longer to implement. But it's an idea. It's a blueprint. It's a party manifesto. And I agree they shouldn't be passé. But the Doug Ford example that Danielle cites is a compelling example and reason why some parties might not want to even bother, and maybe it won't hurt them.
I wonder how much voters believe political parties when they look at the platform. How much truth do they see in the calculation? And you try to work the numbers in your favor, right? You look at the way you're going to generate revenues, and we can go through each platform that was tabled in the past few days, and you'd find some stuff that is probably questionable, or at least maybe overly optimistic in some way, shape, or form. And so voters at home are looking at that thinking, Really? You're going to do that? You're going to raise that many billion with this? And maybe that's why it becomes, I don't want to say less and less relevant to a certain degree.
But okay, so let's be specific here. Let's dig into the main party platforms, and let's start with the Liberals, because I think this is kind of an interesting concrete example, right? You have Mark Carney, who has been building this case over the course of weeks, right? Build, baby, build. He wants to build Canada. He gets up there, he makes his announcement on Saturday, and he speaks about this grand vision for the country, how Canadians can give ourselves more than Donald Trump will ever take away from us. But then you look at the media coverage afterwards, and the headlines were about the increased deficit spending that's going to come under Mark Carney compared to what would have come under Justin Trudeau. That matters. And I do think that things like that, maybe the electoral jello is already pretty much set. Maybe it's too late in the game. But I do think, especially in this election, where a big part of this is turning around Mark Carney's resume as somebody, one of the world's foremost experts in macroeconomics, some of his supporters have said about him, somebody who gets the economy. I think it's important for people to know, and it may factor into their calculation, that in order for him to achieve the vision that he has set out, the government's going to run up a bigger deficit. The debt is going to increase.
I think the headline that you saw coming out of this platform, it's because the platform clashed with the image that Carney was trying to put forward for himself, or the people around him. Like he was supposed to be the guy coming back from the finance world, cleaning up the budget, cleaning up the finance, bringing everything back to the center, and all of a sudden he's promising 130 billion, if I'm not mistaken, in new, not spending, investment. We're investing. It's splitting with. There's operational side and investment side. I don't think it makes much of a difference to do that, and I don't think in the head of voters this separation that the Liberals are proposing between the operational budget and the investment budget is making much sense. But it doesn't work with the picture, with the image that he's been putting forward since the beginning of the campaign, and that's why you saw the headlines you saw the next day.
What Carney has been spending this whole campaign doing is providing a contrast, or trying to provide a contrast with Justin Trudeau, the sort of contrast that Pierre Poilievre said is not there. He was the economic advisor, et cetera, et cetera. And here's a document that says that the deficits will rise steadily. The fiscal anchors will go out the door.
Not the fiscal anchors.
Not the fiscal anchors. The fiscal anchors being that the idea that while you're not going to necessarily balance the budget right away, you'll limit the budget. You'll have anchors like what is the GDP?
It's the debt to GDP ratio. But it's like we had like a fiscal fence, and then we had a fiscal roof, and now we've got fiscal anchor. None of those were the actual terms.
There's
but
no fiscal.
No, they've been moving the goalposts on this for a while, and I do think every time the government. Or every time the Liberal Party moves the goalposts again, that's worth noting. But at some point, too, you wonder if it all ceases to have meaning. So I'm leaning in on the cynical side, at least when it comes to the fiscal anchors.
Well, and how did the conservatives roll up that platform into a big whacking stick? They put out an ad today talking about $130 billion in new spending.
Liberals are promising $130 billion in new spending.
Carney's plan projects higher deficits than those expected under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
The federal Liberals have released their fully costed plan today, and it features big spending, but no timeline to fully balance the budget.
Now, that's a bit of a distortion. If I'm not mistaken, guys, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm good at being wrong about these numbers. It's that $130 billion isn't totally new spending. It's also the revenue loss from tax cuts. Is that correct?
I think you're right.
It's all deficit contribution.
But in the head of voters and in the way it's perceived and in the way it's going to be used, rolled up to whack the Liberals' head, it's a spending.
In a lot of voters' minds, and the Conservatives will certainly be driving this, it's an extension of Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney will talk about, separating out the operating and the capital budgets and talk about time to build. But I think if you're just looking for quick bottom lines and headlines, you'll see higher deficit under the Carney Liberals and under the Trudeau Liberals. And that's going to pose some challenges for some people to the Liberals.
And so we should probably just sort of bang out a quick list of what the Liberals are saying Canadians are going to get for that kind of spending, right? So we're talking about more infrastructure projects of all kinds, more energy infrastructure projects. They are promising a big boom in building homes, and they are promising a tax cut that is on the lowest tax bracket. The Conservatives are also promising a tax cut, but the Liberal one is a little bit less than half the size of the Conservatives. The Conservatives went bigger on this.
With some extra spending in the military as well.
That's right.
And also $28 billion over 4 years in unspecified savings from productivity.
Yes, and this is interesting because they're sort of saying, listen, we're not going to cut a whole bunch of jobs in the civil service, but we're going to make everything work more efficiently. And that, too, is one of those little things that should be, I think, a bit of a flashing light for normal folks who are paying attention to this.
Whenever you see the name unspecified savings, it's usually fuzzy.
Yves-François Blanchet said during the debates last week, Harry Potter fiscal plans. and I do wonder, is there a little bit of wizardry that goes into unspecified savings? Why don't we talk about the Conservatives and what's going on with them?
That was an interesting one, too. They all fit the style of campaign that they've been running, right? If you look at the NDP platform, they want to reinvest into healthcare and doctors and all that jazz. If you look at the Liberals, they want to have big project and infrastructure and high-speed train. And if you look at the Conservatives, they want to rein everything back in. Cuts in spending, cuts in the public service,
Foreign aid, right? It's going to cut by about a third.
As well.
Yep.
The thing that struck me the most and that particular costed platform was the revenue side and the way they were calculating some stuff. And that seemed to me a little overly optimistic, especially stuff like the house buildings, the revenue associated with building new house. They're evaluating at 12 billion, if I'm not mistaken, the revenue that can be drawn back from building the 2 million plus house that they're promising to build. And when we asked Poilievre to explain that, he said, well, the people building the house will pay taxes, and those taxes will increase their revenue. Well, for that, you need to have two things that happen. You need to reach your goal of building 2.5 million house, and you need to assume that that plumber wouldn't have worked on anything else and wouldn't have paid income taxes somewhere else. So it seems to be a little magical. There's that, and the economy that they think they can generate by canceling all the environmental measures that the Liberals have adopted over the past 10 years.
And, that's a lot of oil and gas. Activity, let's be clear. And that sort of thing, let's remind people that the oil prices in world markets will determine that how much oil and gas expansion goes. A whole lot more, generally speaking, than policy and regulation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway for folks is that when you look at how the Conservatives came up with their numbers and how the Liberals came up with their numbers, it's apples to oranges, right? The Conservatives have said, okay, we can factor in the way our plans are going to juice the economy. And so the Conservatives are out there, we were just talking about like taking the big stick and beating the Liberals with it for the deficit spending. But if we try to do apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, bear with me here. The Conservative platform says that a Poilievre government would run 4 deficits that add up to about $100 billion. But if you take out the revenue that they projected, that juicing the economy that isn't in the Liberal platform, they didn't do the math that way, the number actually rises to $160 billion. The Liberal plan over 4 years, it's $225 billion in deficit. So there's a gulf there. It's not insignificant, but it's not as big as the numbers might suggest that it is. This is a practice. This adding in the juice is something known as dynamic scoring. It is a way of setting up budgets that they do in other countries. And from what I can tell, and I am not an economist, there is disagreement amongst economists about whether this is copacetic or not. You had Kevin Page, the former parliamentary budget officer, suggesting this week that not such a great idea. Trevor Toome, another established economist, saying, this is a way of doing things.
It's not a standard practice. It hasn't been in Canada for many decades, including past Conservative governments, including Mr. Harper's government. I think there's a major credibility problem with respect to those estimates.
And this is not unusual. When a government puts out its budget, the economic circumstances matter a lot for what revenue will be, for obvious reasons. If GDP growth is higher, employment is higher, then income tax payments and GST revenue and corporate taxes are higher as a result. So as economic circumstances change, so too do budget numbers. And that's all conceptually that the Conservatives have done.
Maybe a way to make that more relevant to the voters would be to agree on one system and make sure that everyone plays by the same rules. And that would make the platforms a little easier to understand and comparable from one party to another.
Here's another little interesting wrinkle in the Conservative platform. When the Conservatives put out a Quebec platform early in the campaign, they had this one promise that attracted a bit of attention. They want to, and this is a quote, put an end to the imposition of woke ideology in the federal civil service and the allocation of federal funds to university research. And it's especially that university research bit, right? The idea that the government might say, okay, this is a bridge too far. We're going to strip out this university funding. One issue for the Conservatives is you look at what's happening right now with Donald Trump and Harvard and the education system in the U.S. There are echoes. Poilievre doesn't want to sound like Donald Trump at this moment. And you have university researchers saying, hey, this is an overstep. Now, that wasn't in the English platform when it was put out the other day. And so we reached out to the Conservatives and said, hey, what's going on? Is this still a pledge or not? The Conservatives have come back and said it was a publishing oversight, and they have gone and added that into the English national platform. So nothing to see here, just an oversight.
Yeah. Oh, you've noticed it's not there. Okay, we'll put it back then. Okay. It stirred some reaction in Quebec this week, that particular measure. There was a couple of public comments from one conservative candidate in the Montreal region about that. And that is scaring some universities here in Quebec. And in the context of what we're seeing in the States right now, it doesn't make the party look super good.
Another wrinkle let's talk about is the tax cut. This was, of course, the big promise, bigger tax cut, as Catherine was saying earlier, than the Liberals, the Conservatives were promising, except now that we have their full platform out, they're actually slow walking it. This whole, I forget how much is it, 15% lower tax rate for the first step on the income tax bracket. It won't come in till the fourth year fully of their platform. So we won't get that big economic effect for affordability purposes until the end, whereas the Liberals are putting it at the start of their term. The other interesting thing I really thought about this was I was talking about to keep up with my rolled up platform and whack-in. Boy, did Mark Carney seem animated about this. He's not normally the partisan slugger that other politicians, or that Trudeau was, or that Poilievre is, but boy, was he going at it, talking about the phantom numbers and the made-up numbers, and we could have done the same thing and balanced our budget too. It made me wonder, maybe he has a future as an opposition finance critic if things don't work out. No, he was animated in a way like, he's like putting on his macroeconomic big boy pants and just hitting it.
And
if he gets to that point, he's going to be better at doing that in English than in French, because in French he was not so animated. It was all right. We got it. But he was much better in English on that.
And I thought he did get asked by somebody, we mentioned Trevor Tombe a minute ago. Well, Trevor Tombe doesn't agree with part of your calculations. And his answer was basically, I know better. Right? Like, perhaps you know that I know a little bit about the economy, folks. I know better, which, is probably not ultimately what his campaign team would have liked to have said.
I think that's what economists called a dynamic scoring contest.
Ooh.
Oh.
I want to talk really quickly about the NDP here. And yes, it does not look like they are going to form government, but I'm going to give you my pitch for why the NDP platform still matters. Take a look at the dental care program, right? The design of that dental care program, a lot of that actually goes back directly, I'm told, to an NDP platform, right? So while we might say, well, they're just trying to save the furniture, in this really interesting situation we had in the last government of the Supply and Confidence Agreement, what the NDP put out there on the table, even if it's not something that the majority of Canadians are seizing on, there's a world where it can still have a pretty significant impact on what Canadian politics look like. So we should take a quick glance at that.
That's an interesting example you give, the dental care. I think it requires a very specific context of a minority government where the party in power gets the support from the NDP and then are being forced to implement something that was in the platform. I didn't see anything in the NDP platform that had the potential of becoming the next dental care program. I think there was a lot of aspirational things, and he's been talking about healthcare quite a bit since the beginning of the campaign, and there's the big issue on that is that a lot of it is provincial responsibility. And so he's promising and he's investing and he's throwing money at a problem where he doesn't really have the levers to make it happen.
They did lay down their marker for support in the case of a minority government, that they would require a rent cap. Although that, on one hand, I would say that, rent controls and rent caps are a provincial jurisdiction, but so is dental care and child care and pharmacare. So I think we can maybe if platforms aren't passé, maybe jurisdictional issues during elections might be.
Fair enough. But bottom line is, they've tabled those platforms pretty much right after the advanced voting was almost done. So no one cared that much about the platform when they went and voted on Easter weekend. If we want them to matter, those platforms, maybe there should be a bit of a rule that says you need to table them in the first or second week of an election campaign. Otherwise, I don't see it moving the needle that much.
Well, then we think back to last campaign, 2021. Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives put out their campaign platform, fully costed at the start of the campaign, and, a whole lot of good that did him.
Well, it certainly worked for the Liberals, who rolled that up in this big newspaper and whacked Mr. O'Toole with it all through the campaign.
Okay, so I think we've established that they're useful, whether it's as a whacking stick or an important tool in democracy, as some of us might argue. The platforms play some kind of role. I guess we may or may not find out how big a role in just a few days' time, guys.
Oh my God, is it going to be an election next time we're doing this?
The election will be over. Can you believe it? But that doesn't mean the party is over. Guys, you want to try this again next week and see what we make of the results?
If there'll still be some champagne left, yes.
Oh, that sounds good. Okay, I'm in for that. Maybe we could see if some of the platform items are being, headlined in the first week.
Listen, guys, whatever happens, it's going to be fascinating, and I cannot wait to talk to the two of you about it. Let's talk soon on the other side of this thing.
Always fun.
That's it for House Party for this week. Thanks to my co-hosts, Jason Markusoff, Danielle Thibeault, and thank you to our production team, Caitlin Crocker, Jennifer Chevalier, and Carla Hilton. Be sure to give us a follow in the podcast feed for The House so you can catch both House Party and my other show, The House, every week. 2 shows in one feed. The House will be with you on Saturday, and House Party will be back next week after the election results to try to make sense of it all.